Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks everyone for attending our ICANN78 update session. This is an update after the last ICANN meeting that happened in Hamburg. With me is an ICANN veteran. He's been in ICANN for quite some time. It's Mason Cole. He's the Internet Governance Advisor for Perkins Coie. Mason has been involved in Internet domain name expansion, issues management, and brand protection for more than 20 years, a recognized leader in Internet governance. He serves as chair of ICANN's business constituency, where he is a vocal proponent of responsible policy development for business users and brand owners. And he's been doing that for quite some time. Quick housekeeping note, we'll try to take questions as we're going and not necessarily wait till the end. So if you have any questions, go ahead and slide it into the chat, and I'll try to get to that. I don't expect that this session is going to take the full hour, so hopefully we'll be able to give you guys back sometime today. Here is the topics that we are going to talk about now. There's a whole host of other things that happen at ICANN. I think these are the four real critical issues for brand owners. The Whois RDRS, that continues to be a big topic, and it actually kind of dominated a lot of ICANN in Hamburg. Tackling DNS abuse, transposition of NIS2 Directive in Europe, and also next steps in the new round for GTLDs, the sub-pro, and what's happening there. I'm gonna get started here with the RDRS. A lot of you know that we've had an RDRS, our Whois requester system here since 2018, so we are really familiar with how to make those submissions and the requests that need to be made. And after the GDPR, and the redaction of a lot of the Whois information, I think there was a lot of outcry for some kind of system to be able to provide that Whois information. SAD was on the table for a while, which was a much more comprehensive system, but because of the cost, the ICANN decided to take a whole different approach, and this is the approach, which is the RDRS, and they approved it in February of this year. So the real function of this particular system is that it's a centralized request. It creates a centralized request into one particular portal, right? Which is actually really good. So you're going to have you're going to have all the registrars, within the portal, and then all the requests are made to the registrars, and it becomes really more of a routing system or a ticketing system than it is a comprehensive SAD system, right? So all the requests will be routed to the appropriate registrar. They'll kind of do their balancing test. But what happens is everything happens outside the system. So the registrars will follow up with the requester outside of the system. That doesn't happen within the system itself. A couple of new notes that we will provide here. They will be released on November 28th of this year. So that's right coming down the pike. And right now, they're estimating to have over 50% of the GTLD registrations participating in the system at the start, right? Not 50% of the registrars, but of the GTLD registrations. But before November 28th, you're going to have to make those requests outside of this particular system to the particular registrars. So what is interesting about this is that when SAD was put to the side, ICANN looked at this particular system and said, well, look, we're going to make it a proof of concept. We're going to try to figure out what the user demand is before we even start putting any money into a much more comprehensive system, right? So this is really a proof of concept. And which a proof of concept necessarily means that it's temporary, right? So they're just going to use the system to gauge demand. If there isn't enough demand in the system or for Whois information, I think that will send a message to ICANN and the registrars and the whole community that perhaps there shouldn't be an SAD system or any Whois system at all. And so this temporary system will really be evaluated over a 2-year period. So maybe until November 28, 2025, because it's coming out now. They're saying it's only out there for 2 years. There's no guarantee that you're going to get any of your information, even if you provide the information. That's not to say that you shouldn't provide the information, because they will be capturing the domain names that are put into the system. Even if you make a search, they'll be storing that information, right? And it's only for participating registrars. So the problem with that is that if the registrar isn't participating, even though the system will allow you to search on a name, you're just going to get an error message that basically said that you're not going to be able to get you're not going to be able to proceed any further because that registrar is not participating. However, again, the domain name that you search on, that will be stored by ICANN and the associated registrar. And so down the road, hopefully they'll be able to take that information and go to that registrar and say, look, we're getting a lot of requests for information off, your registrations. Can you, please participate within the system itself? That's kind of the idea. So, registrars are going to continue to be really cautious in presenting that Whois information. And ICANN is basically saying, look, they're already in compliance with NIS2, Article 28. Mason's going to talk a little bit about that, but still, they're going to be doing this balancing test and determining whether or not to provide you with the information or not provide you with the information. ICANN is looking increasingly outside of, or the community is looking increasingly outside of ICANN to try to figure out, how else we can drive more action around Whois and getting that information, getting accurate information, Whois information back to requesters. We got a let me kind of set this up for you here. This morning we were given some slides off of what the RDRS looks like, Mason and I. So we thought we would just kind of put it in here. Haven't really had a chance to really evaluate it, but here's what this is looking like, and you'll see here, the domains are going to be, you're going to from the portal view, you'll be able to see whether or not what's pending, what domain names that you've asked for information on, whether they've been approved, denied, or canceled. Is that information publicly available? So that. It's not going to capture a lot of information, but it is going to capture what you're actually seeking to get from the registrars. So what you're going to do is they're going to ask you to first go and see whether or not the information is actually there. Take the lookup tool and evaluate whether or not it's public available anyway before you even proceed in the system. And then if it's if it's not publicly available, then you proceed with the system. One caveat here: the only way to really use this system is you have to have an ICANN account. So you have to go to ICANN and you have to set up an account to be able to use the system, because what it's doing is it's pulling information from that ICANN account, right? So you'll see here, if it's a qualified domain name, it's just going to go, it's going to go, you're going to put your name in, and that's going to fill out all the fields for you, because it's going to have all the information off your ICANN account. It's going to tell you, here are the error messages that I spoke about. If it's a CCTLD, you're not going to get any information. If it's a GTLD that's not managed by a participating registrar, you're also going to get an error message, right? So these are the two things that are going to pop up for you. Then a couple of interesting things here. One is you're gonna be able to put in whether this is a standard request. Yeah, I can wait for this, or this is an expedited. There's something really emergent about this that you need this information right away. So it provides you with that ability. You're also going to be asked to state whether or not you're submitting it on behalf of a third party, or this is on your own behalf, and then you have to put your legal basis, right? That's always been a part of those requests, right? And they're going to have a number of different the ability to pick the different templates and put in what your legal basis is, and then add any additional information that you want to add to it to validate and to support that that request. Now that's going to be really important, especially if you're going to, if there's a phishing attack or there's something else that's really critical. You're going to need to really specify what the basis and what that and provide any supporting information to support that legal basis. And then really at the end of the day, you're going to ask to do some affirmations, which is basically you're going to agree that this is to the best of your knowledge, accurate information, and that you're affirming that any personal data that you're going to get, you're going to actually, store it and keep it within the, in compliance with any of the applicable data protection laws. And I think that's it on these slides. Mason, do you have anything you want to add to any of this? I mean, this is obviously just a few slides. There's a lot more slides here that they've got. That's going to probably be going out. They're going to be doing a lot of demos. They're going to be providing a lot of information to the public, to the community. So we thought that, just to kind of give you a taste of what this is looking like, here's some slides for you.
Yeah, thanks, Faisal. I would add one other thing, and that is that it's really important that the user community employ the RDRS over a sustained period rather than just blast the system for a month and then maybe get frustrated with some of the lack of output and then throw up your hands and say, well, it's a useless system, I give up. A very important part of rolling the system out and trying to measure demand is in fact measuring demand. And so it's going to be really important that users sustain their use over the 2-year trial period as much as possible. Otherwise, ICANN can come along and go, see, there's not that much data that's really necessary out there in the world, and so we don't need to give you Whois. That would be a terrible outcome.
Yeah, exactly. You basically asked everybody to do it. They did it just for the first month, but they don't really care because they haven't done anything since then, right? I mean, that's how they're going to be looking at it.
Right.
Good point. So what do we think you should do? Obviously use the RS system. Even if you don't think that there's a participating registrar, you should put the domain name in a search for that registrar, and you'll obviously get that error message. But at the end of the day, there's still value by doing that because they're capturing that, and we can then go to the registrars and say, look, you should be participating in this because there's a lot of requests for information that you're housing. The next meeting is in San Juan, and we're gonna, that's probably going to be a much more robust meeting around some of the information that's already trickling, that will already be trickling in on the RDRS, because it would have been ongoing since the 28th. So you got 3 months maybe of data that they can provide. What will be really interesting is that they're going to be sending out surveys intermittently. So we're all going to be able to send back information to ICANN as to how things are going and what we think about the system. And of course, Mason is part of the business constituency and advocating for all of us here. But the more people and the more companies that are part of this group, the bigger our voice. Same for the IP constituency at ICANN. Okay, I think that's it for me. Mason, you want to?
Yeah, thanks again, Faisal. Sure. There are a couple of issues I'm going to cover here before I give the floor back to Faisal. The first is something that's been in the works now for a couple of years and on the ICANN front, and that is finding new and improved contract language that will deal with domain name system abuse. I'll get to the contracts in a minute, but first, what is DNS abuse? Well, it depends on who is proposing the definition. The ICANN registries and registrars have done a really good job of advancing their own definition into the community, and that is that DNS abuse is constituted of malware, phishing, farming, botnets, and spam as a delivery method for the first 4. Others don't share such a restricted definition, like the Security and Stability Advisory Committee at ICANN. Lots of others are not so precise, and they say that it's really important to keep a broad definition of DNS abuse in order to anticipate new threat vectors. Now, whether or not, to the extent that'll be accommodated, it remains to be seen. But to the point about contracts, what is being done about DNS abuse by amending ICANN contracts? So ICANN accredits registries and registrars, and these are known as contracted parties in ICANN circles, and then enters into them with accreditation contracts, which elucidate expected behaviors on the part of registries and registrars. The current contracts are really weak. They work to the contracted party's advantage in that they don't impose significant obligations in terms of DNS abuse, and they don't give ICANN's compliance function very much in terms of teeth to go after the bad guys who do harbor various forms of abuse, intentionally or passively. So the good news is these contracts are now being updated. There was a negotiating period between ICANN and the contracted parties. A red line of the contracts has been published for public comment. That public comment has closed. But the upside is there is now an established affirmative duty for registries and registrars to actually act on abuse, not just investigate it and take appropriate action, which is what the contracts say right now. In terms of these contracts becoming binding, the registrars have to vote to ratify them, and they have to get a 90% ratification rate for the amendments to come up binding. That's a tall hurdle to get over, but we heard this morning that it looks very much like the contracts are going to be approved. So that's good news. Okay. Rebecca, can I advance these slides, or do I have to ask you to do it?
I got it.
Okay, thanks, Faisal. Okay. So what kinds of amendments are being proposed? You can see a list here. There's several, starting with the definition of DNS abuse, requirement to promptly take appropriate mitigation actions. It permits contracted parties to exercise some discretion in terms of mitigation actions, but that doesn't water down their duty to act affirmatively to disrupt or get rid of an instance of DNS abuse. So in terms of the status of those amendments, as I say, voting is now open until December 2023. It looks like we're going to get above the threshold. So those amendments are going to come into force. They'll come into force in 2024. There's a waiting period until the contracts themselves are updated, signed again, and then are considered to be in legal force. Okay, Faisal. So again, what happens? You got to get 90% of registrars to ratify. While we didn't think that contract amendments went far enough in terms of really dealing with DNS abuse, there is talk in the community about doing what are called PDPs. It stands for Policy Development Process, to address other things that would be useful for brand owners to have in their toolbox when dealing with abusive registrations on through the DNS. For example, the ability to act at scale. If you're filing a UDRP, you don't want to file, and you've got one perpetrator, but he's got 500 bad domain names. You don't want to file 500 separate UDRP actions. You want to do it one time. Same thing with DNS abuse. If you know that there's one bad guy and he's hosting a ton of DNS abuse across several hundred domain names, you don't want to make 350 different replies or complaints to the registrar. You want to do it at the account level, excuse me, so that you can act at scale and wipe out a bigger swath with one effort. There are other issues too, like CSAM, that's child sexual abuse material, response times on the part of registries and registrars, registry level mitigation of DNS abuse. There are lots of things that are going to be on the table over the course of the next couple of years. So what should brand owners do? Again, same as the topic Faisal just covered in terms of RDRS. Follow your representatives inside of ICANN and contribute to the discussion to the best of your ability, because it's really important to have these voices. ICANN can turn into an echo chamber, and it's easy to believe your own headlines, so to speak, and it's much easier if we have fresh voices participating. Okay, Faisal. Okay, Topic number 3. This is the NIS2 directive that comes out of the European Union. NIS2 stands for Network Information Systems. Number 2 means it's the second directive dealing with a very comprehensive list of information security issues that European regulators have proposed and are now implementing into the market. Why is this important? Well, because one certain article inside the directive, it's Article 28, deals very specifically with domain name registration data. And several of those provisions in this to clarify treatment of Whois data in a way that could be helpful to the people on this call. The directive entered into force in January of this year. It'll now be transposed into law by European member states. There are 27 of them. The deadline for doing that is October of next year. So they've got just under a year to get their transposition done, and then they can start enforcing this as a matter of national law, jurisdiction by jurisdiction. So what does NIS2 say about Whois specifically? Several good things, really. One, it ensures that it has to be accurate and complete. None of this, entry of data like, my name is Mickey Mouse and I live on Main Street in Disneyland. It needs to be accurate and complete. It needs to be made publicly available, not only to law enforcement, but any data that is not personal data, including the data of legal persons. So there's a separation between natural persons and legal persons, and legal person data is not as confined by GDPR as natural person data is. Contracted parties have to respond without delay within 72 hours. Well, you could argue that's quite a bit of delay. That's 4 days. It doesn't take that long to look up a Whois record, but excuse me, this is the timeline that we're dealing with at this point. And then to provide access upon lawful requests. And then the data has to be free of charge. There are already registrars who are charging a fee per Whois record. Presumably that'll have to be done away with, but that's good news too, because it'd be very easy to run up a hefty bill of Whois records if registrars were allowed to charge for those records. Okay, Faisal. So what's the status of NIS2? As I mentioned, 27 European member states have until October of next year to transpose the directive into jurisdictional law. We've had conversations in Europe and in other venues, but with European officials about what they're doing to help guide member state implementation. We've been in touch with those authorities about clarifying Whois related provisions in transposition efforts. There is going to be the potential for detail level differences in implementation jurisdiction by jurisdiction, meaning one jurisdiction might be much more restrictive in its interpretation of Article 28 than another member state might be. And so what we're concerned about there is contracted parties gravitating to the jurisdiction with the weakest compliance burden, and then continue to play some games with Whois, but we're working on that too. If you're a brand holder, what should you do? If you're in Europe, you need to pay attention to Whois related provisions, specifically Article 28. There will be lots of discussion about NIS2 over the course of the next year as member states get really serious about transposing the directive into binding law. So if you're active in INTA or other trade associations that are active on NIS2, it's important, again, that you participate because we need as many voices heard as possible. Okay, Faisal, I think I'm done talking for a while. Go ahead.
Great, thanks, Mason. So, I mean, this is the last topic that's on that we felt would be really important to discuss. It's really the sub pro, which is a new GTLD rollout. The last one was in 2012, I believe, and so ICANN has put down a date, which is April of 2026, when the application will open up for applications for the new GTLDs. Obviously, there's a lot of pent-up demand, like from mostly from registrars, a lot of brand holders who do want an extension for their business purposes. So what has happened at this last meeting? There was a ODP, which is an operational design phase, that dropped a report by this working group for the GNSO, which had about 400 pages of recommendations that needed to be, resolved, recommendations to the board, and what's happening right now is there's a slow process of getting through all those recommendations so that this can actually roll out by April of 2026. So there wasn't a lot happening at this particular meeting. But certainly what we're seeing now that we haven't seen before is a lot of attention that now is coming to the new GTLDs that we did not see before. But again, what's got to happen is it's a cumbersome process. And yeah, we've got April 2026 as kind of like the stake in the ground, but a lot has to happen before we get to that April 2026, including going through all of these recommendations and resolving them to get, these are all recommendations that are coming off of what happened in the last round and how we can improve the process. So I think it's really important that we get it right and that we learn from what happened in the 2012 rollout. For brand holders, I think it's just really understanding what's happening with the process right now. The other thing that happens around this are rights protection mechanisms. We had the URS that came out of the last round, and we had a number of other rights protection mechanisms. There may be additional ones that will accompany this round as well. So we need to stay on top of it. Obviously, Mason and the BC are all over this. There's a lot of work that happens within the BC, and a lot of the policy and the comments that are made from this volunteer group that is looking at everything that's coming out and making recommendations based on what businesses would want to see. And a lot of that's going to be happening as well around the this particular process as well. And I think that's it. We'll have more information for you. San Juan is coming up in March. We'll have more information for everyone around new GTLDs. But I imagine it's going to be a lot of the same of going through these recommendations and trying to figure out how to make this as seamless as possible for the next round. Other than that, if anybody has any questions, try to get through it as quickly as possible. I'm going to give you back 30 minutes if there are no questions. Mason, do you have anything you want to add?
I don't think so, Faisal. That was pretty comprehensive. I mean, as you mentioned, in San Juan, it's going to be very busy because the timeline for acceleration of new TLDs it'll be speeding up. RDRS will have been in use presumably for 4 months, and we should have our first set of data about it, which is going to be really important to this audience. So it won't really be a quiet holiday season coming up. There's a lot of work, as you say, going on behind the scenes. So lots to pay attention to.
All right.
There is one question. Are brand TLDs part of the same process? Brand.
Yeah, I'll take that one. Hi, Sean. Yes, brand TLDs are part of the same process in terms of when the new window for applications is going to open up. Then the discussion in the community is that categorizations of TLDs like brands or geographic TLDs, et cetera, will be made sure to be added to the process, and not added, but included in the process as you might anticipate. There are some questions about whether or not those categories of TLDs would be given priority over other categories. In the last round, it was wide open. You had a geo TLD, you had a brand TLD, you had a generic TLD, you had whatever. They threw it in one big melting pot, and some TLDs came out. Have not yet decided about whether or not brands or others would be prioritized, but you should expect to see brand participation in the next round. So, Faisal, you feel free to add to that.
Oh, I think that's exactly right. That's a good answer.
Okay.
Rebecca, are there any other questions?
There are no other questions right now.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Faisal.